Why would somebody invest in a franchise? You might be surprised to hear this, but over 10% of the businesses in the United States are actually franchises. With that many franchises, clearly there's something going on there. But is it all good? Mostly good? Or they're there because there's no alternative? We've definitely looked at a number of franchises over the years, and we're starting to take a harder look at them. In today's video, I'll talk about the bad parts, the good parts, and what our experience has been. To get to this point, we have looked at a lot of companies over the years. After having looked at thousands of companies over the years, you start to develop an ability to more quickly assess whether or not it might be a company that you want to eventually purchase. I would like to say that we have this real fancy evaluation process and you put in all the information and it pops out a yes or no at the end. What I have found, the company, the industry, et cetera, it's important, but at the end of the day, it's the people. And I firmly believe that. It's very similar to what a lot of investors in venture capital would say. You have the product, you have the market, whatever, but at the end of the day, it's the people. Unfortunately, it's really hard to evaluate people and whatnot. You really just, got to go with your gut. I'm not infallible in my ability to do so. However, I will say on the deals that we have been most excited and ultimately have been most successful, it's not necessarily because our analysis going into the deal was right or wrong, or even our assessment of the people was right or wrong. The companies that are successful currently have great people. It's as simple as that. In thinking about whether or not to buy a franchise, a lot of factors to look at. Over time, I've gotten a feel for, in my view, what are some of the bad parts and what are some of the good parts. In terms of the bad parts, there's one more boss. If you think about a normal business, you have customers, suppliers, vendors, maybe regulatory authorities or whatever, and all of those are going to compete for your time, for your resources. Generally speaking, they're all easy to work with, and that's great. Regardless, when working with a franchisee, you have to put one more place at the table, and even though that relationship might be good most of the time, from time to time, it's going to be a challenge. And that's why I would say that that's one of the bad aspects of buying into a franchise. The other component that is perhaps the biggest negative is that, a lot of times the incentive structure for the franchisor is misaligned with the incentive structure for the franchisee. What I mean by that is, oftentimes the royalty mechanism for the franchisor is based off of revenues at the franchisee level. That seems fair. That incentivizes the franchisor to focus on revenues, whereas at the franchisee level, sure, you have to care about revenues, but more so than revenues, you have to care about profitability. The franchisor can do things that improve the franchisor's revenues and ultimately profits, but hurt the franchisee's profits. A great example of this is couponing. Now, couponing sounds good at the surface level because it increases revenues and whatnot and maybe brings new people to the store.
Coupons are genius!
But it's really mostly good in a lot of cases for the franchisor. At the franchisee level, sure, you're getting some new people into the store and you're increasing your revenues, but depending on how aggressive the coupon is, you might have increased revenues with break-even profits for that customer. And the argument that you're getting new people into the store, yeah, that could be good, but what if this customer is only going to come into the store when they have a coupon? Is that really a high value customer? I would make the argument no. That's just one example of why the incentive structures could get misaligned whenever you're dealing with a royalty structure where the franchisor is compensated based off of the revenues of the franchisee. The final negative is around development agreements. I think many franchisees new into the system, might be able to buy that first franchise with their personal savings or from money from friends and family. That's great. You don't have to bring on any debt. There's no personal guarantees. And so if you lose all your money, all you lose is the amount you put up. You're not putting your house at risk, other assets or whatever. That can change if the franchisor requires a development agreement. What a development agreement would indicate or dictate is that you add a number of stores over a set period. What's more is oftentimes in a development agreement, there will be a personal guarantee. Even though you might have been attracted to buying into a franchise because there wouldn't be a personal guarantee, that might all go away if the franchisor requires you to enter into a development agreement. Just another point to consider about buying into a franchise system. With the bad comes a lot of good, actually. I would say one of the initial benefits of evaluating a particular franchise is that you get a lot more information than you might get if you were just looking at a non-franchise type business. The information is coming from what is called the FDD, or the franchise disclosure document. The FDD has a wealth of information, from startup costs to average revenues to pretty much anything under the sun that you are going to be required to do, or as much information as the franchisor can share about what to expect in terms of buying into that franchise. I mean, it's by no means the complete diligence you need to do on the brand, but it's a great starting point and it's tremendously helpful. The other helpful aspect of buying into a brand is the brand awareness. International, national brands like McDonald's, Burger King, Subway. It's a lot easier to start your own franchise or develop a franchise whenever there's a large mass that's behind you. It has momentum. It has not only awareness, but top of mind awareness, which is, incredibly hard to get. That brand awareness is huge. It's a big reason why you would be willing to pay that royalty or the fees to the franchisor. Building on that brand awareness, a big reason why that brand awareness is there is the marketing that the franchisor executes on your behalf. They're going to have a far larger marketing team than you would be able to afford at the franchisee level. If you think about some of the big franchise brands, I mean, they're getting NFL athletes, NBA athletes, famous actors and actresses. I mean, even though that it's very hard to determine how much that actually creates in terms of revenue and profits at your individual store, people start to associate certain celebrities and personalities with a brand. And I would say that that usually is helpful. Now, big disclaimer here, that as positive as being associated with a certain personality can be, there is absolutely the potential for a negative or impairment of that brand because of celebrity or personality. A great example here, especially when we've been talking about food a little bit, is with the spokesperson Jared Fogle for Subway. I don't think anybody watching this video not only know who Jared Fogle is, but doesn't also would have an idea of what they think about Jared Fogle as a person. Extremely negative, huge tarnishment for the brand, as well as very much impacted revenues, not only at the franchisor level, but at the franchisee level as well. Generally speaking, I think the marketing and the brand awareness component of working with the franchise is good. However, there is that disclaimer that there's the potential for the next Jared, if you will, to tarnish that brand. Buying into a franchise, you get a playbook. Now, I'm not saying it's a literal playbook. What I mean is that the franchisor has processes and procedures that have been developed and honed and optimized over time that will help the franchisee be more successful. This might be analysis, product innovation, a lot of different factors. Speaking of product innovation, look at Taco Bell, for example. I feel like Taco Bell every month, or maybe even more frequently than that, has a new product to introduce. This is not how some companies do innovation, where originally on the label the letters were in blue, and their idea of brand innovation is now the letters are in red, and you should go out and buy every item that's on the shelf because the lettering is red now. You see new products from Taco Bell they're very creative, and that creativity and innovation gets people to remember Taco Bell, gets people to come into the stores. It's a tried and true recipe for success for that brand. Not only is it things like product innovation at the franchisor level, there's also operational components that can be very helpful. Let's talk about store hours or pricing. My view is that companies in particularly the lower middle market, are perhaps more unsophisticated in the area of pricing than other areas of the business. This is where a franchisor can be tremendously helpful, because they will not just have data points at your particular store, they'll have data points for the entire network. Pricing, it's no crystal ball, but certainly more data are helpful if you have a franchisor that is effective at analyzing that data. Similar story for store hours. You might be wondering whether or not you should close on Saturdays at noon, or you think maybe 5 p.m. would be good. In most businesses, you're just gonna have to try it out and see what works. In a franchise, oftentimes if you have a good relationship with your contact of the franchisor, you can talk about that with him or her and see what their thoughts are. You probably are gonna get to know a few other franchisees in the system, and that's the type of thing that you can discuss with them. Perhaps you're not gonna talk about this to the franchisee that's down the street, or if there's a lot in your city, maybe you'll go outside the city or outside the state. But still, the point remains. When I talk about the concepts of store hours and pricing, those aren't just two that I plucked out of the air. Those are two examples of how the franchisor is particularly helpful on a deal that we're working on, which I think is a great segue to talk about what our experience has been like on this particular franchise deal. We've got a great relationship with the franchisor, and we haven't even formally closed the deal just yet. Sometimes there's some hiccups, and not necessarily just hiccups. The franchisor does things or require certain things that we wish they didn't. But come on, I really don't think there's been anything that has been unreasonable. In fact, I would think that it would be unreasonable on our part to think that the franchisor is going to do everything that we ask of them. Yeah, it's not reasonable at all. All in all, the benefit we get from that franchisor far outweighs any friction. The second component that is unique to the particular deal that we're working on is that there's a lot of change at the franchisor level. To some people, this might feel risky or feel uncomfortable, but one of the pillars of the 4 pillars name is challenge the status quo. So I'm comfortable with this change, and in fact, it's really a breath of fresh air, all the changes that they're doing. When we look at some of the changes and what some of the new leadership has done in prior position in their career, we're excited about it. There's a reinvigoration to the brand that we get to be a part of. Unfortunately, that's just, it's not something that's replicable. You're not going to find this in every brand, or really you're not going to find it in many brands. But again, this is one unique element of working on a franchise deal that we've encountered, and is something at least to think about whenever you're evaluating whether or not you should buy into a franchise. One area where this concept of one more boss really hits home is Chick-fil-A. As much as we love that brand, we're never going to consider getting into that brand in its current form, if you will, because the current situation is that they'll only allow a franchisee to have, 1 or maybe 2 stores. Certainly not 10, 20, 50, hundreds. That works for them. It works for the franchisees in their system. But for a group like ours that, again, is looking to have tens of units, or if not hundreds of units, at least tens of units, the current situation just makes it a non-starter for us to try and get into the Chick-fil-A system. Now, Jared Fogle is certainly an interesting topic. If you'd like to hear more about how Jared Fogle plays into the overall Subway story, I did a whole video on Subway. You can find a link in the comments. It's also on my channel. You should check it out. Now, I appreciate all those who are still watching. You might be growing a little tired. I'm gonna come clean with you. I'm probably more tired than you are, because I haven't just recorded this video once, I've recorded it twice. Yeah, that's right. I forgot to hit the record button the first time. Showing that I need some help sometimes, let me know. What do you think is a franchise system that would be really attractive as a potential acquisition target? Let me know in the comments. Also, feel free to send me an email at the email below. As always, please like and subscribe, and I appreciate you watching.